Welcome to Gen Z Insights, a podcast series from IFES, helping you reimagine what Christian ministry amongst today's students looks like, wherever you are.
If you've spent any time in student ministry, you've probably noticed that today's university students are different. We're hearing this not just from older adults, but even from students born a few years earlier. They're part of what some people are calling Generation Z or Gen Z. And they are the largest single generation in the world today. Rapid cultural change. Many in the IFES national movements are realizing that we need to go beyond ministry as usual. How can we better understand how to reach, disciple, and release students from this new generation? Welcome to Gen Z Insights. I'm your host, Annette Arulrajah, the Associate General Secretary of IFES residing in Malaysia. Today we are kicking off a new podcast mini-series helping us reimagine Christian ministry among Gen Z university students where we are. Each episode will bring us research insights from across the IFES Fellowship, interviews from those involved in student ministry around the world, and questions for us to discuss in our context. IFES commissioned Peter Dray to visit student movements around the world and hear their experiences of Gen Z. Peter has worked with UCCF, the IFES movement in the UK, for more than 20 years, first as a staff worker, then Director of Creative Evangelism, and then Interim General Secretary. He recently published findings from his Gen Z conversations across IFES in a new report titled Gen Z Insights for Global Student Ministry, now available on the IFES website. Do check it out. Peter's report identifies 4 big themes about Gen Z globally, and today's episode focuses on the first theme, the digitally immersed generation. We're going to start off with a pre-recorded clip from Peter so he can orient us to Gen Z and the digitally immersed generation. Afterwards, we'll hear responses and reflections from our panel. But right now, let's hear from Pete.
Hello, my name is Peter Dray. I've been in student ministry for more than 20 years. Just before the pandemic, I started to notice that the questions students were asking were changing. Here in the UK, the pandemic then accelerated this pace of cultural change among students. So I started asking, what does faithful Christian witness look like to today's students, sometimes called Generation Z? IFES national movements, I found, are wrestling with very similar questions. I visited a range of those movements around the world, talking to students, staff, and leaders. Based on those conversations and my recent report, this podcast series will take a look beyond the news headlines and beyond the stereotypes about Gen Z to explore what's really going on. Who are Gen Z? Gen Z or Generation Z are individuals who were born between 1997 and 2012. That means they're people who today are aged between around 13 and 28 years old. Around the world, 1/4 of people alive today are members of Gen Z. We're talking not only about the current generation of students, but tomorrow's students and some of our younger staff members as well. But let's reverse for a moment. What even is a generation? It isn't just a group of people who were born at around the same time. It's also a group of people who are shaped by similar conditions. The world events, technologies, cultural norms that a person grows up with calibrates how they see the world and especially what they consider to be normal as they grow up. Of course, cultural differences and personal stories still matter hugely, but thinking generationally helps us to understand how big macro-level changes can shape the outlook of people who are growing up at around the same time. In this first episode, we'll consider one of the most important defining traits of Gen Z, that is, their digital immersion. Gen Z is the first generation to grow up with fast, easy internet access in a very wide range of countries. Many of them can barely remember a time without smartphones and social media and instant connectivity. It is, of course, worth saying that a huge disparity remains in access to the internet and digital technologies between the West and the global South. Nevertheless, Gen Z's internet usage exceeds that of the general population in every global region. In my research trip for IFES, I was surprised at just how digitally connected those I met in the global South were. In many of these countries, Gen Z has leapfrogged older technologies and gone straight to mobile internet and to smartphones. In Timor-Leste, for example, I found that many from Gen Z have never used a desktop computer, and yet they use their phones for virtually everything, from social media to university learning. Despite high costs, Gen Z prioritizes access to the internet in ways that older generations struggle to understand. In Timor-Leste, but also in Kenya, I met students who were prepared to spend vast amounts of money on mobile data, even if sometimes it meant that they didn't have enough to eat. Well, let's think about how being so immersed in the digital world is shaping what Gen Z values. My report outlines 3 shifts and why they matter for student ministry. Firstly, they value authenticity. Gen Z know only too well how things can be digitally manipulated. Things that seem one way online turn out to be very different in real life. And this has given many Gen Z students a hunger for genuine integrity, not just in the way that things seem, and not in word only, but in the way that they are. One student in Ireland told me, "My friends want to see that Christianity is real, not just right." Secondly, there's a shift towards brevity, but it's brevity with depth. I found that Gen Z loves concise communication, but we mustn't mistake that shift for shallowness. They want depth. They just want it delivered in accessible, bite-sized formats. You might think about short testimonies, explainer videos, written introductions that can serve as bridges to deeper engagement with the gospel further down the line. One student from Hong Kong told me about a group of Gen Z women who've started attending her church after first making a connection through TikTok. Her church uses social media content, she said, as ladders, easy on-ramps that help those who don't know Jesus to start exploring church. The point isn't to dumb down, but to remove barriers to access. And then thirdly, I noticed a shift towards flatter organizational hierarchies. Growing up with social media has reshaped how Gen Z views authority. They want to understand the why behind decisions, and they expect their voices to be heard. At the IFES movement in Singapore, for example, younger staff and students have called for increased transparency. Perhaps because their digital connection has made them more aware of Christian failures in leadership globally. And in response, the national movement leaders are wisely aiming to provide staff with more context around decisions and involving them more in planning processes. Here then, I think, is the challenge, balancing clear leadership, but also honouring Gen Z's legitimate desire for transparency. Together, these 3 shifts signal a potentially very exciting moment, I think, for student ministry. Before I hand over to the group discussion, let me share one closing thought, and it's this. Gen Z has unparalleled access to information. And yet here's the tension. National movement staff around the world are noticing that their students are accumulating biblical knowledge, But this knowledge is not necessarily translating into spiritual wisdom or maturity or fruitfulness. After all, watching a YouTube video on prayer isn't the same as developing a rich prayer life. I found staff are asking, how can we help students then move from mere information to godly wisdom, from merely knowing about Jesus to truly encountering him? Are there ways we can help them embrace the slower rhythm of faith formation without losing them entirely? I know I have raised many more questions than offered answers here. By the way, that's deliberate, and so now it's over to you. But I hope and I'm praying that these questions are used by God to kickstart discussions around the world about how we might best serve Gen Z in our various contexts today.
That was indeed a great orientation about the digitally immersed generation. Today, I'm joined by 3 guests. I'm excited to hear their reflections on what we have just heard. Our conversation will focus on what digital immersion looks like for students in different places and how we can apply what we have heard to help students thrive as disciples of Jesus and witnesses on campus. First, I'd like to welcome Eden Hale, who's joining us from California in the United States. Eden, long time we haven't met. So glad you can join us today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Eden serves as a student representative on the IFES board. Having graduated in 2023, he now works in a nonprofit and also as a substitute teacher. Eden is all of 25, which means that he's a member of Gen Z, and we are very much looking forward to hear his perspectives. Eden, I'm curious. What resonated with you most from what we just heard? And was there anything that didn't resonate with you?
Thank you, Annette. Yeah, I think there was a lot to unpack, and I feel like I connected with a lot of what he was talking about. I think the tension that he talks about between biblical knowledge and understanding how quick information is passed in Generation Z and how accessible it is can be a good thing, but then also how do you live out your faith within that? And I think that's a very true experience. I think sometimes one of the things I maybe questioned what he talked about even was that it's not about dumbing down, but it's about easy access. And I think that line can be kind of blurry. I think I've found that sometimes, unfortunately, the access to social media and things can dumb down information without having it. And so I think it's about finding that line in between. But that the importance of it is definitely less about this fast, easy, like, hey, this is the information, this is the gospel, but it's actually about kind of the hard, true Christian life that we live. And I think that's what's more important for a lot of young people, is to say, it's not that life is easy, that it's not that, oh, here's the information, here's how you solve it. It's that, no, I want to grow as a lifelong Christian. I think that's true.
Yep. And it is hard. But you would have witnessed and experienced digital immersion yourself in your own life, or seen it amongst your peers. How would you describe that?
I mean, it's funny because I think in a lot of ways it's the water we swim in. I think it's not exclusive to like the way that it's almost like writing. It's almost like it's I don't even think about it. Like when I send a text, I'm not thinking about this big meta-analysis of how does this connect with the larger picture. It's just I'm doing it. And I think for a lot of young people, and even for those that it's less access to, I think that's just the way that you talk. I think I have friends from across the world that I'm very thankful for, and that I wouldn't have without social media of some kind. And I think that's an amazing thing to be just as connected. But again, it's give and take. There's challenges to both that aspect of it, because then I can feel disconnected from people that I live down the street from, because maybe they're on their phone while I'm talking to them, or vice vice versa. And so I think, yeah, there's a variety of different ways. I think it opens up a lot of doors, and it also, you just have to watch what's on the other side of that door, I guess, is the fear sometimes. So
Thank you, Eden, for these perspectives. And, I like what you say about what's on the other side of the door. And let's keep that door first. And let's move to our second guest. Now welcoming our second guest, Esteban Amestegui from Bolivia in South America. Thank you, Esteban, for being with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Esteban is Langham Preaching's Global Coordinator for Resources and Prayer. He also holds various other roles in Langham and is developing a youth advisory panel for Langham Preaching. This means he is very interested in Gen Z. In fact, he even wrote a chapter on communication in digital times that was included in theologian Rene Padilla's book, Roots of an Integral Gospel, that was published in Spanish. He is no stranger to IFES, as his father was a former General Secretary of the National Movement in Bolivia. Esteban, could you tell us how you have seen a digital divide in your country between young people with good internet access and those without?
Thank you, Annette, for the question. Well, Bolivia, we are at the center of South America, at the heart of South America. We just celebrated 200 years of independence, and we have a long history of inequality and also colonization, and we have suffered a lot through that. Nowadays, we are struggling with our economy also because our local currency have lost the value, and the dollar has increased the value by 2 times. So everything that comes from another country is more expensive, and that has increased the value of many things that we need in our day-to-day basis. So many people who had access to digital work, and perhaps they can have a remote work with organizations from the United States and other countries, they still have the increase of value of many things. They need to pay more for things that we need in our daily lives, but maybe their income has also have increased.
It really pains me to hear of what you actually see and experience daily, that kind of great divide amongst those who have the access to digital space and those who don't. Yeah. And I wanted to continue to hear from you about what Peter Dray said about the shift towards authenticity, brevity with depth, and flatter hierarchies. These trends, which of these trends do you most easily recognize in your context?
I think the authenticity is one of the shifts that I see the most. We have a local influencer. Her name is Albertina. She's from the rural area and she had access to a phone. It wasn't like the best phone you can find in the market, but she was able to record videos. And she started recording her day-to-day life with the sheep, with the llamas, with the vicuñas, and how she cultivated her food and how she started her day and prepare her food. And in a few months, I personally saw the growth of her TikTok channel or her TikTok account. And now she's like a lot of companies hire her for video spots. And she even was part of one of the latest Vogue magazine covers. So she gained a lot of popularity really quickly in a few years. And I remember as a millennial, when I prepare a video, I try to look the best, perhaps wearing my best clothes and preparing everything around me to look very well. But I've seen many Gen Z people enter a Zoom call or connecting or preparing videos online with their pajamas and just pressing record and start to talking to the camera. So that's something that I've seen changing a lot. And I think that's actually really, really good, because when you prepare things, some things can be seem a little bit artificial or and stuff like that. So it was really nice to see that that change present in my context. But regarding the brevity and depth, brevity with depth, I see that happening with the external communication of churches and Christian organizations. But for internal communication, or for example, the informal communication going on, I've seen, for example, a pastor in my church who connected on Discord with the younger generation, younger members of my church, and they could go through an entire night playing video games and talking with each other. So perhaps they want brevity with TikTok videos or external communication of the organizations, but they are open to have long conversation and chatting all the time with their leaders.
I couldn't agree more with you. And thank you for those precious insights from Bolivia. Thank you, Esteban. Now, our third guest, Alejandra Ortiz, is no stranger to us in the IFES world. Welcome, Ale. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Annette. It's my privilege to be with you all.
Alejandra is IFES Secretary for Research and Global Conversations. She's also one of the leaders of the IFES Task Force on discipling the new generation of students. She also serves in the leadership team of our next World Assembly, which is the global gathering of the IFES family. And right now, she's joining us today from Oxford, UK, where she's on a research visit for her PhD, which looks at women who pioneered IFES movements in Latin America. Ale, you've been involved with IFES for many years, and you've served with your national movement for 13 years in Mexico. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on how we could apply some of what we've heard. I mean, what might it look like for IFES movements to use technology to offer more accessible entry points to help seekers engage with the gospel? How can we do this while maintaining depth and substance?
Thanks for the question, Annette. I mean, I think to be really faithful to who we are as IFES, I would say that this question is better answered when you ask the students who are already doing this. And I've seen this. I've seen this among student friends from different parts of the world, and especially among students who I've been with in Latin America. And they're doing different things. So I was thinking of a student who was sharing with me how she curated songs in Spotify, like a Spotify list of songs, as I was speaking on the prophets and how do we engage with culture. And she said, well, you know what? I had this list and I added some more. And I think this would be a great entry point to talk about prophets today if we start thinking about music. And I thought, yes, like perfect. That's a great example. So students are doing this. They sometimes need good questions from us. I'm also a millennial, and I do identify in that sense. So I've been asking this question myself because I want to connect with those who are younger than I am. I think another way, and I participated in this in Latin America, is to do podcasts, as we're doing right now. There was a great podcast being done by a Brazilian a graduate student connected to the student movement, and she was connecting also with people from other student movements in Latin America, and then also with other movements around the world. And she made some podcasts on the life of the university student, especially or geared more towards students doing graduate studies, but talking about issues like violence in the university, talking about issues like overworking and all of this. And it wasn't evidently Christian, but it was made in order to actually create conversations and to be then conversed with others. And most of the people who were leading these conversations were with the student movement, and they were talking about faith. So I think things like this, some that require minimal work in some ways and some that require more work, are great ways in which we can engage with others and engage with students who are seeking, who are wanting to learn more about what the gospel is, about what Christians do, what they believe. And in some ways, it even gets us to deeper conversations because we're talking about issues that have to do with life. So we're not trying to connect the gospel in ways that would seem artificial, but we're actually talking about the gospel in connection to things that have to do with everyday life of the students. So I think it starts with asking students. It starts with learning from the students who are doing this work already, and then thinking together about creative ways in which we can continue to engage the gospel.
Ale, you seem to be showing us that actually the students are already doing something and they are our teachers in some ways. And thank you for that. But I want to refer again to Pete Dray, that he talked about information overload versus spiritual growth. And we'd love to hear your ideas on how we can help students move from mere information to godly wisdom, from merely knowing about Jesus to truly encountering him. Are there ways we can help Gen Z embrace the slower rhythm of faith formation without losing their engagement?
I've been thinking a lot about this question because I think that the gift of Gen Zs for us is that they won't buy what we say if it's not accompanied by our lives. In order to actually walk alongside students or younger generations, I have to walk the talk. And that requires vulnerability and authenticity. And these are things that Pete talks about. I think that for once is that to help students consider what does it mean to actually follow Jesus, to encounter him. It means that we model that. We're invited to actually allow students to see what that looks like, not because we're perfect at all, but because we're doing it and we're doing it in the best way that we can, and that means opening up our lives. And as students have, I think students and young staff have a developed sense of smelling authenticity in ways that I think older generations didn't have, and I think it has to do with the connection to other things, to their emotional well-being, to other aspects that they're more sensitive to, and I think that's a good invitation for us who are wanting to mentor and walk alongside others. The reality is that we are more than the connectedness to the digital. We are human beings that in the end of the day, we need to think about what that means. So I think that in the context of relationships with students, with young staff, but only in the context of the relationships that walk into in vulnerability and that seek authenticity and that are authentic. We can ask deeper questions, and we can invite to silence and to solitude and to other things, because students, I think, are open and are looking for ways actually to recognize who am I beyond all of this, beyond all the voices. But we haven't done that for ourselves. It's really hard to actually walk alongside others and invite them. So I think those are some things from my own experience that I think I can offer.
Thank you, Ale. You know, having the three of you here has been so rich because you have enlarged our perspective to what Pete Dray has left us with, or what Pete Dray has tickled our minds with. And, you know, right from the start, Eden, you said that the digital immersion is the water we swim in. And how right you are, you know, especially your generation, the Gen Zs. And it is about finding the line in between living the hard Christian life and being totally immersed and being bombarded by the lots of information. Esteban, you talked about authenticity and how that is what Gen Zs really all about, especially when you quoted the influencer from Bolivia. That story is very powerful. And Ale, you too seem to be speaking about how all this can only make sense if we live and walk the talk. You know, I wish we had more time to be able to keep talking, because there's so much rich perspectives you can bring us, but I need to bring this to a close. So I want to thank each one of you, Ale, Esteban, and Eden. Thank you for taking this time to be with us and for joining us in this discussion of what it means to minister among the digitally immersed generation. To those of you listening, thank you for joining in. I encourage you to continue the thinking and conversation on this in your own context. We have more resources to help you to do that. Visit the IFES website at ifesworld.org and look for the Gen Z Insights website. There, you will find Pete Dray's report. You will find Bible study reflections and other helpful resources from across our fellowship. Finally, if you have enjoyed this episode, do follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and do join us for our next episode, which will look at the culturally aware generation. See you again soon. God bless you.